This video will show you how to add a new supplier, formerly called a vendor, to Fiscal and submit it for approval. A supplier you plan to do business with must be in Fiscal before any transaction takes place with them. Note that in some cases, you might want only to add a new supplier address to a supplier that is already in Fiscal, such as in the case of large companies with chains of stores. This video does not cover that situation. This video is for when you have found no sign of a supplier in Fiscal, so you're not adding to or changing a present supplier, but creating a completely new entry. Before adding a new supplier to Fiscal, verify that the supplier is not already present in Fiscal. For instructions on how to do that, please watch the previous video on verifying suppliers. Before you can start this process, you must have a complete and correct Standard 204 form from the supplier. In my short experience with Fiscal, the top reason a new supplier gets rejected or denied is because of a problem with the Standard 204, so resolve any issues you see with the 204 before beginning this process. Per CAL FIRE policy, you will also need to collect a CAL FIRE 20 form if the supplier will be performing services, and possibly a CAL FIRE 501 for motels. Keep the originals of all these forms in a file for the supplier, and scan them to PDF format so they can be uploaded to Fiscal when needed. Once you have a correct scanned PDF of the Standard 204 form, you are ready to begin entering the new supplier into Fiscal. With few exceptions, all the data you enter will come directly from the Standard 204, so have a copy of it either on paper or on screen as you complete this process. Let's get started. Log in to Fiscal. For instructions on how to do that, please see the previous video on logging into Fiscal, and navigate to the main menu. Click, go down to Suppliers, Supplier Information, Add Update, and finally, Supplier. You might want to save this page in your Fiscal favorites to avoid the long chain of menu navigation in the future. The page defaults to an interface for searching for suppliers, but to add a new supplier, click the Add a New Value tab. Do not change any of these fields. They must remain saying State, Next, and Regular. Just click on Add. You've now entered the interface for adding a new supplier. There are 5 main tabs at the top. We'll be entering data in all of them, and many fields, drop-down lists, links, buttons, and checkboxes. Most of them you will not touch. Follow step by step with this video, and don't touch anything I don't touch. The example I'll be entering is a Standard 204 that I have made up. It's not a real company, and is being used just as a guide. So I won't be clicking Save at the end. But everything else I'll do is the same as what you would do to enter a real 204. My invented company is called ABC Company, and it has a mailing address different from its business address. And it has a DBA, also known as a Doing Business As. If your 204 does not have a DBA or has only one address for both mailing and business, there are a few steps you won't have to do. I'll mention what they are as we go along. Let's start here on the top right with the supplier name. Take it directly off the 204 from the field labeled Payee's Legal Business Name. It doesn't matter if you type it in with lowercase, uppercase, or a combination of letters. Fiscal will convert everything you type in to uppercase for you. Below supplier name is the additional name. This is not a required field, but if the supplier has a DBA, you can enter the DBA name here. And there are other additional steps for suppliers with a DBA, which I will mention later. If the supplier is a sole proprietor and has written their sole proprietor name on the 204 under the business name, you can also put that in the additional name field in Fiscal. Otherwise, you can leave this field blank. Since mine has a DBA, I will enter the DBA name, Bob's Bulldozer, here in the additional name field. Moving to the left is the supplier short name. This is an interesting field. The supplier short name is a 10-digit name with no spaces, usually from the first 10 letters of the supplier name. For example, Central Coast Construction, Central Coast Windows, Central Coast Landscaping. The first 10 letters of all of these are Central, COA. So it's possible to have more than one supplier in the world that starts with the same 10 letters. But this field, if at all possible, should be unique in all of Fiscal. For the moment, just enter the first 10 letters of the supplier name with no spaces. We'll check for duplicates later. There's a button for that. This field only accepts 10 letters, so you don't have to count. It'll stop taking letters when you get to 10. The name of my fake business happens to have 10 letters, which is convenient. Below that, you'll find the classification drop-down field. When you click here, you want to select whatever the 204 says in the Section 3 Payee Entity Type. In my case, this fake company is a corporation, so I click Corporation. Now something about DBAs. If the 204 says the supplier has a DBA, there's some extra steps you'll do. And the supplier relationships box will be very important. But don't touch it this time on the first pass through. For DBA suppliers, you will complete this entire new supplier process once using the actual business name, ABC Company in my case, as a supplier name. And once ABC Company as a supplier is approved, you will go through this process a second time using the DBA, in my case Bob's Bulldozer, as a supplier name the second time. On that second time, you will check this corporate supplier box. Checking it makes these two fields, corporate set ID and corporate supplier ID, active. You can search them by clicking on the magnifying glass. You won't touch the first one. Corporate set ID must remain saying state. Corporate supplier ID, however, you will click on this magnifying glass and then search for the supplier ID of the approved official business supplier that you entered the first time, in my case, ABC Company. I would search for it, find it, click on it, and then continue entering the DBA supplier, in my case, Bob's Bulldozer. To summarize, here's a slide that shows the steps. If your supplier does not have a DBA, don't touch the supplier relationships box. Don't check corporate supplier. Don't do anything with it. Just leave it alone. Continuing on, scroll down a bit. For all suppliers, click on this arrow in front of additional ID numbers. This is the only one of these several that we're going to touch. Click the arrow to open it. Go here to this box labeled Type. In this box, put TIN. If you click on the magnifying glass, you'll see there's other options for this box, but you're not going to use any of them. Always type TIN. In the ID number field, you're going to put either the FEIN or the SSN, that would be Federal Employer Identification Number or Social Security Number, that you find on the standard 204. Although there are dashes on the 204, don't enter the dashes here. Fiscal does not understand the dashes. It only wants the numbers. So I take the FEIN from my standard 204 for ABC Company and enter the numbers here. Again, I made this number up. It's not a real number. A common error suppliers will make is putting both an FEIN and a Social Security number on the 204 form. If both are on the form, it will get denied by Fiscal. So if you have a form that has both of them, you should resolve this with the supplier now before continuing with this process, or it'll just give you extra work later on. Scrolling back up this page, near the top you'll find this orange button called Check for Duplicate. This is your last line of defense to prevent duplicate suppliers from being entered into Fiscal. When you click it, hopefully you will get a message popping up that says there were no duplicate suppliers detected. If it tells you it found duplicates instead, either in the name, the short name, or the ID number, you'll need to go look at them to make sure they do not match the supplier you are trying to enter. If you find that your supplier that you're entering is already in Fiscal, don't enter it again. Stop doing this process. In my case, this is a fake supplier, but we'll see what warnings it gives me. Here's a message from Fiscal. It detected a duplicate short supplier name, which is not unexpected. It's also telling me there's a duplicate supplier identification number. That's the FEIN number. So it's not as fake as I thought it was. Somebody in the world has this number. There's going to be a link here now, since it found duplicates, that I can click on to see what the duplicates are. It looks like there is an ABC company somewhere in the world. So it's checking against mine, and it's finding that it looks like it matches. I'm not going to worry because I know mine is fake. But if you do yours and you get some pop-ups here, you'll need to go to these supplier IDs, click on them, they're active links, and see if the link it takes you to, the supplier it takes you to, matches what you have. I'm just going to close this out. It also told me my supplier's short name was already in use. That doesn't mean that the supplier is already in Fiscal. It just means that there's a business somewhere in the world with the same 10 digits in its short supplier name. So to fix this, you'll need to change the name a little bit. You can shorten it, take letters out, make a more unique supplier name. For example, when I entered Central Coast Windows, there was another supplier that already had the first 10 letters Central COA as its short supplier name. So I just took CEN from Central, CO from Coast, and WINDO from Windows, and invented Cenco Window as a short supplier name. So you can do something like that. Once you've made your adjustment to your short supplier name, if you had a problem with it, you can click Check for Duplicates again to make sure that you have been creative enough in making a new short supplier name. It may seem silly, but the field is required. Once you've resolved that there's no duplicates in the system, move on to the next step. Click the blue Attachments link. This will give you a pop-up. Here is where you will upload your scanned 204 form. Click the Add Attachment button. Another pop-up will open. Click Choose File, and it will give you the opportunity to locate your 204. When you've found it, click on it, click Open. The name will appear next to the Choose File button, and now click Upload. It may take anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes to upload the file. There's some text here that says, maybe you should save your transaction before you add the attachments, but I'm not sure this is good advice. If I click Save on the supplier, it may submit it for approval. Obviously, it will be denied because there's no 204 form and I haven't completed the supplier entry. So maybe it's not a good idea to save first. Maybe you just wait until the form loads and uploads to Fiscal. Once it appears here, you can put a description in. You can just do something like standard 204 for whatever your business name is. Then click OK. Now you'll see beside the word attachments in the parentheses there's a 1 to indicate that there is one attachment on this supplier. Once you've done that, you're done with this first tab. Moving on to the second one is the Address tab. Click on it. Here's where you will enter the addresses or address from your 204. If they've written only one address, the mailing address and the business address is the same, you can just put the word main in the description, like that. I have two addresses, however, so for the first one, I will put in mailing. Moving down, effective date. This should be the same date you got the 204. So take the date off of the 204. In my case, it's 10/15/2018. You can leave the 20 off and Fiscal will figure it out. Move on down to the address. Enter the address exactly as it appears on the 204. Match it exactly. If the creator of the 204 abbreviated street as ST, you abbreviate street as ST. If they wrote out the whole word, street, you write out the whole word, street, and so on. You want to match it exactly. Again, you can put it in lowercase or uppercase, and Fiscal will figure it out and put it in uppercase for you. Don't use address field 3, it's broken. Move on to the city, postal code, and state. Come down to the bottom of this area and you can enter the telephone number. Enter just the numbers. Fiscal can't always figure out the parentheses, dashes, or slashes that you might put in with a number. So just do it exactly as it appears without any dashes, slashes, or parentheses. The prefix is not for the area code, it's for the country code. So if I had a vendor who's in Mexico, I would put 52, which is the country code for Mexico. So otherwise, just leave the rest of this blank. If you have more than one address, you want to enter both of them. Go up here to this plus, click it. You'll see address ID switches from 1 to 2, and you've got a new blank form to fill in. I have a second one. This is the business address, so I would put business in the description. Again, I'll change the date. And then I'll continue with entering the address here. But you kind of know how that goes, so I'm going to skip the rest of it just to save on time. When you're done with that, go to the Contacts tab. For description, you can just put main. Yet again, change the date. Leave this effective status active alone. Go to type. I usually put general. That should work for everything, but if you have some other particular option that you think is ideal for your particular 204, you're free to choose it. Put in the name from section 5 of the 204. For a title, put in the title from the 204 that this person has assigned to themselves. For address, just put 1. Here is where you can enter the email ID if you have one. In this case, I do. If you have an internet web address, you can enter it, but you don't have to go look it up. This field can remain blank. If you have a second contact for some reason, although most 204s will only have one, but if you have a second one, just like with the addresses, you can click on the plus to get a second field, second form, to enter the other person. Go to location next. Here in this field, just put main. You don't have to enter a description. Change the date again. And now of all of the things on this page, we're only going to click on 3. Procurement, sales and use tax, and 1099. Start with procurement. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. Don't worry about it. Go down to the very bottom to procurement card information, click on the arrow. Check this box. Accepts procurement card as a payment method. Check it even if you're not paying with CalCard this time. Checking that will open the rest of this area. You can ignore it all except for card type. go and pick Visa. Don't have to touch anything else. Click OK. The procurement link is done. Next is sales use tax. Click on that. Only one thing to change. Go from non-taxable to sales tax. Click OK. Lastly, the 1099 link. This is one form where we're going to fill in everything. This form will also adjust itself based on what you enter. So your cursor may kind of blink around in different fields. Things you check might get unchecked. You have to recheck them. Just be patient. Let the form adjust itself. Fill in the fields in a nice leisurely fashion. Starting with entity, you enter IRS. For type, you'll enter 1099. For jurisdiction, FED, Fed. Click this box. Click it again if you have to. Default class, 07. Come down to the next row. Entity again is IRS. Address, click 1. For TIN type, you have two options, F or S. If you entered a FEIN off of your 204, which will also appear right here, type F. If you entered a social security number because it was a sole proprietor, type S. You're done with this screen. Click OK. The last tab, Custom, is very easy. It defaults to this field, and you're going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Until further notice, you will put this number for every single supplier that you enter. And you're done. You're done with the data entry. You can click back through the tabs if you want to check your work, review anything, or change anything. When you're satisfied that everything is correct, click Save at the bottom of any tab. They all have Save at the bottom of them. Click on Save. Since this supplier is a fake one, just for this guide, I'm not clicking Save. But when you do it, you'll see at the top right of your screen a little Save icon will appear for a few seconds. Then you'll be taken back to the Identifying Information tab. I'll show you what that will look like. Not that one. Not that one either. There it is. You'll be taken back to a screen that looks like this. It will show your vendor. The highlighting won't be there. And you'll see that a supplier ID has been assigned, but the status is still unapproved. You can't make transactions with this vendor yet. You'll notice another tab, a summary tab, has been added. If you click on that, you'll get the screen that you get when you search for vendors or suppliers. It also will have the supplier ID. It will also say unapproved. Even though it says open for ordering, you can't do any transactions yet. Now, if you check your email, you will get an email that looks like this from the Fiscal folks. It says, a supplier has been entered that requires your attention. That is a lie. You don't have to do anything. You're just getting a courtesy copy of a system-generated email that's getting sent to the Fiscal team, telling them to go check the supplier you just entered and make sure all is in order. You just have to wait for a few hours or at most a day or two, and you'll receive another email to tell you if your supplier has been approved or denied. If it's approved, you'll get an email that looks like this. It'll tell you it's approved, all is well, and you can proceed with your business with that supplier using this supplier ID that's been provided. If, however, there's a problem and your supplier has been denied, you'll get an email that looks like this. It'll tell you it's denied. Even though there's a supplier ID, you can't go forward with making purchases with this vendor. You should receive a second email, probably from this person who updated it, telling you why it's denied and what you need to do to resolve the problem with it. If you don't understand, email them back and ask them for more clarification. The process for updating suppliers to correct errors and denials or to add addresses to a present supplier will be covered in a different video. This concludes this video on the addition of new suppliers to Fiscal.